Hi, I'm Sarah Friedland. I'm the writer and director of Familiar Touch. I'm both a choreographer and a filmmaker and work in between moving images and moving bodies. So Familiar Touch is a coming of old age film, and it follows Ruth, who's an 80-year-old woman, and her transition into an assisted living facility. But rather than being a film about, death or decline or sort of the tragedy of aging, it's really a close character study of this woman and her relationship to herself, her own desires, her agency, her creativity, but also a portrait of her relationships with her caregivers, both her family caregivers and professional caregivers in this new home. The inspiration for Familiar Touch came from both personal and professional experiences. On the personal side, I was inspired by my own grandmother, who was a poetry editor and someone who was very connected to her relationship to language. And when she developed dementia and became nonverbal, my family started speaking about her in the past tense. And yet she was still incredibly physically expressive. That space between this person we were saying was no longer there, and this person who persisted through her bodily experience of the world, through her sensory experience of the world, through her affective experience of the world, that kind of gap really disturbed and haunted me. It seemed to me that we tend to think about people as cognitive beings, and I think that's quite limited, that we are much more than just our cognition and our memory. And then on the professional side, I worked as a caregiver for a New York City artist with dementia for about 3.5 years, and then started teaching filmmaking to older adults and making films intergenerationally. So I spent the better part of my young adult life working with older adults. And in this job, in all these jobs, I think one of the things that struck me is how much more fluid our age identity is than we think. That the older adults I worked with, they didn't see me so much as just a younger person and them an older person, but we really identified with one another, and they could access the version of themselves when they were a child, when they were a teenager, a young adult, middle-aged person, and that their age identity wasn't quite so fixed at the number that they existed as. So that gave me the inspiration to tell this story of aging as a coming-of-age film, where we're watching this character transform and go through this moment of transition, but also seeing her as somebody who is all of the selves she has been, not just an old woman, and to sort of push back against some of those tropes around old women of being cute grandmas, or just a narrative of decline. I think most cinema around aging depicts aging as a tragedy, rather than a sort of continuity of life. I think Familiar Touch is for anybody who is aging, anybody who has cared for someone else, or anyone who has been cared for. And in that way, I think it's for everybody, because I don't know of a single human being that doesn't fit to one of those categories. And my hope is that young people will watch it and see themselves in Ruth, our protagonist, and perhaps not see older adults as other than us, but as just us in a few years. Yeah, I don't know. I hesitate to answer that more fully, because I think, in a way, movies are best viewed with as few preconceptions as possible. So I would just say, I hope you see the film and sort of give yourself over to its rhythms, and yeah, it's yours now. It's no longer mine. I think that's one of the beauties of being a filmmaker, is when it's done, it stops being yours, and you have to give it to the audience. So, off you go.